Do you have confirmed case interviews and need to get ready fast? Then look no further than our free case prep plan. There's a link in this episode's show notes to download it. Like I said, it's free. It's a step-by-step plan that walks you through the A to Z of case interview prep. So each day, you know exactly what you need to be focusing on to get ready for that case interview. This is the exact plan that we use when we're coaching our clients through our Black Belt and our Super Prep programs, and we know that it works. Again, this case prep plan is free. Link in the show notes to download it today. Hey, Strategy Simplified. Welcome back to another episode. You are in for a treat today with this conversation with KPMG. We brought on Palmer Mayer, a senior talent acquisition leader, to share kind of a state of the union of the firm and specifically about recruiting at the firm in 2024 going into 2025. In this conversation with Naman, Palmer shares which practice areas and geographies are hot and which are not, where the firm is hiring more than in other areas, which jobs are available right now, and what is happening in the near future as far as job availability, what to expect for case interviews, will you expect a case interview at the firm, and content that they're no longer using digital assessments. So there's a bunch of really cool insights about the firm in this episode with Palmer. Hope you enjoy. Check out the links in the show notes for information on working with our expert coaches on case interviews, resumes, etc., and also to connect with KPMG. Let's get into the episode.
I'm really excited to introduce you today to Palmer Mayer. Palmer is a senior director of talent acquisition at KPMG. She leads the firm's advisory and business process group hiring for early talent. And she actually started as a campus hire into advisory almost 20 years ago and has built an entire career at KPMG. She's a graduate of Auburn University. She lives in Atlanta with her husband, 2 children, and a Yorkie. Palmer, welcome to today's call.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to be here to talk today.
Well, let's jump right into our conversation today. I want to ask you about what's on everybody's mind right now, which is around just the hiring landscape in consulting. And I know you specifically deal with early talent hiring at KPMG. So can you just give us a lay of the land? I'm going to put forward a thesis here, and you can tell me where I'm wrong and where I'm not. But what I'm seeing across the landscape is that hiring is picking up. Firms are really taking care to continue to fill their early career talent pipelines because they're thinking long-term about career strategy and about just what their staffing is going to look like, not just into 2024 and 2025, but 2026 and beyond. So is that true at KPMG, and what additional nuance can you add to that?
That is very true. We are seeing things pick up right now, and it is getting hot in a good way. It's really the momentum we've been waiting for the past, I would say, 2 years. So clients are coming to us, we're selling projects, we are needing more people to start. And so this is really a great time to want to come into the industry.
Fantastic. And when you talk about things are heating up, are you talking about specifically in advisory, in consulting, or across the board?
Across the board. But since this discussion is specifically for advisory, consulting, and strategy, I'm seeing it there as well. We're starting to see the deal market pick up, which is what really drives a lot of the consulting projects. And so it's still early, new stages of it heating up. But with the election year, I expect after the election is decided, whichever way, things will definitely get hot as it gets into the 2025.
I think we're already seeing the IPO market heat up. We're seeing deals come back. Interest rate cuts are on the table. I think it's an exciting time to be in that space for sure. Can you talk to us a little bit, Palmer, about just what's new at KPMG? A lot's changed in consulting over the last 4 years. I think we can finally say that we put COVID in the rearview mirror. And now we're in the age of AI, if you will. And so can you talk a little bit about how kind of post-COVID things have changed at KPMG and how the firm operates and what folks can expect if they're interested in a role in the firm?
Sure. So I'll take 2 parts to this. So from an AI perspective, the firm's investing heavily. We even have a vice chair of AI that is driving that across all the functions. We've invested in have Copilot. We have our own Gen AI for every single group, including business process group. And if people are like, what is that? that's me. Recruiting, comp and benefits, all the groups that support audit, tax, and advisory. And then as far as the way it's changed since we've come back to COVID, we're traveling again, but not to what we were pre-COVID. Pre-COVID was too much. I think everyone learned that we want balance in our life, but we still want to be in front of our clients. We want to come into the office, but it allows to work your way. And I really feel like there's a benefit from the culture standpoint that you're in front of your clients, you're going to the office, but you might work from home some too. And that balance has really driven a positive culture change.
Let's dig into that for a minute, if you don't mind. So
Sure.
what I hear you saying is that if I'm a consultant at KPMG, I almost get to create my own working model. Is that accurate, or is there like a standard kind of 2 days in the office, 3 days at home that folks have to adhere to?
You may or may not like this answer. It really all depends on what engagement you're working on and what are the demands of the client. So if you're needed to be at a client's site, then you're going to be at the client's site. And it won't completely be in your control that you can just decide you want to work from home every day. However, if there are certain obligations that are important to you, let's say you like to play tennis and tennis is on Thursdays. Well, maybe you're flying home on Thursday so you can make it to that league and you're having that conversation. That stuff 10 years ago, we weren't really talking about. We'll talk about it now. Like, your life matters. And so I wouldn't say that it's completely in your control, your whole schedule, but there's at least a conversation that will take place.
Good. I'm glad you said that, because that's what we tell our community all the time, but I think they hear it differently coming directly from you. So, and I think that's all that folks can ask for, right? Is the conversation, a listening ear, and if it works, wonderful. And if not, well, you know what? There are other opportunities for you to live your life, maybe outside of Thursday afternoon tennis. So,
Correct.
yeah.
As an example.
So you said you're traveling way less post-COVID than you were pre-COVID. Are you able to put some numbers around that? Is it 50% less? Am I traveling every other week instead of every week? What does that look like tactically?
Tactically, so keep in mind, I'm on the recruiting side. So I'm getting this anecdotal for the clients that I'm serving. There are people that might be on the road every single week, and then that's the client they're on. And then there's some that might have a local engagement. So that variety has been true for the beginning of time. But there's check-ins. So if you're one of those that want to be a road warrior and you want to keep going on clients that are traveling, then you voice that. If after you've been on a client for a few months and you want to do something local, there's a conversation about doing local. We also are seeing our clients want us there, but they may not want us there all week, every week. And so it's being strategic from a cost perspective, how often does the client want us there and what can we do virtual? So it's a little bit of a blend, and there is no number. Let's say if somebody was at 90% before COVID, maybe it's 60% now, but that's a guess because the consistency is the one thing that's not consistent when you're in the consulting field.
And I think for those of you considering consulting, that's probably lesson number one before you decide if you want to recruit for consulting or not.
Right. Yeah,
Wonderful.
You're going to be on the road. I just think that is something that will happen, but I also think that's the benefit of how much you're going to learn when you are traveling and meeting with all the various stakeholders.
I want to dig into the other change that you mentioned besides for culture and work arrangements, which was AI. And so you said that the firm has a vice chair of AI. Can you talk to us about AI's impacting the work that consultants are doing?
Sure. So we're still in the early stages, as I think a lot of firms are, but we've invested heavily by putting a vice chair in the role. His name is Steve Chase. He was the head of consulting before moving into that role, and that was a strategic investment with his knowledge. Prior to being the head of consulting, he worked within our technology enablement. So his resume of knowledge is perfect to lead this and drive it. What I like to think about it is an analogy. So this might sound silly, but if you think about the invention of the washer machine, well, yes, that saved a lot of time, very efficient, but someone still has to put the laundry in the wash. They still have to put in the soap, and they still have to move it to the dryer. So think about it from a Gen AI perspective. It's not doing everything for you, but it's making things efficient and effective. And so I have it open all day. And if I'm writing a memo, I'll pop it in and say, make this better. And it's better, but it doesn't do the job. I still had to write the memo at the beginning. It just made it better.
One of the things that I found, and I think that's a key point, Palmer, is that the better your inputs are, the better output you're going to get. And so I
Mhm.
think that there's a bigger emphasis being placed in our organization and in consulting organizations I'm talking to on training people to develop better, stronger, more insightful inputs to begin with. And I think that's akin to your analogy of putting the right soap, the right amount of laundry in the washing machine so the machine can do the job it's built to do.
Correct. So prompt training is a big focus. We have a whole, I mean, when you come to a big consulting strategic firm, training is definitely what you're going to get. We invest in training. Our people are what we are using for clients. So if are not on top of things, then you're not going to be successful. So prompt training is definitely something everyone is getting, and it'll continue to evolve as we all evolve on what capabilities are possible.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about the professional development opportunities that are available even outside of prompt training? At KPMG, as at like most other consulting firms, the people are the product, if you will, right? You're selling the strength of your talent. So how are you ensuring that that talent is staying on the cutting edge of what clients are looking for?
Sure. So we built a training facility called Lake House. It is in Orlando, Florida, and it is state of the art. It's like 800 sleeping rooms. It has all kinds of eating classrooms, state of the art technology, and admission center. And the training is top notch there. We also send our clients there for proposals. But every new hire, when they start, they go to Lake House for an in depth training. And then throughout the year, they'll go and be trained. So it is an investment, as well as we have what's called Degreed and Focus, which are online trainings that you can take throughout the year. But I would say Lake House is definitely the standout of what we do from a training perspective and culture. Like you get there, you network with everyone from KPMG and build those relationships. So it's training technically, but it's also training from a personal development standpoint.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like sleepaway camp for consultants.
It is.
Yeah.
It is amazing. They've built a pickleball court, mini golf, like you name it. There's a workout facility. So it is it's not a home. We don't want it to be considered a home because you have your home, but it's a very comfortable place to go and travel and be trained.
I love that. I think the part that stands out to me beyond just the intense focus on training in a short amount of time is the fact that you get to build cross office and perhaps even cross practice relationships in a way that you don't get to at other firms.
Yes. And that's key here, the multidisciplinary model. Like we want to go to market. And yes, we go to market as KPMG, period. Everyone has their own expertise, whether it's consulting or strategy, but there's also opportunities for tax. So there could be opportunities for different things. And so that is also nice when you're working on a proposal that you can just go across the aisle and ask a question and not have to go elsewhere. We have the expertise in-house.
So you mentioned this multidisciplinary approach and strategy when you go to market. For candidates who are listening to this or are joining us live, as they're examining KPMG and trying to identify where they fit best, how do you just encourage them to start to identify which practice, whether it be deal advisory, consulting, strategy, is best for them?
That's hard. The quick answer is hard because they probably most likely can fit into every single one of them, depending on what their background and skills are. It's more what gets you excited. Do a lot of reading. There's a lot of information that is on there that explains what people do. To meet professionals, join things like this, so then you can learn more. Sometimes you start with one where you can get the opportunity, and then you get in and you change roles, and that's okay. So it's okay to try something and then want to do something else. And sometimes you don't know until you do it what you want to do. Uh, if you're thinking about if you want to do consulting or if you want to do strategy is kind of bed within everything. So strategy is a buzzword, and we do have a strategy practice, but there's strategy in almost every group of work. It's just, do you want to be at the beginning think tank, big idea strategy, or do you want to be in the tactical solutions, doing the work with them, consulting strategy? It's both strategy. It's just where do you want to be and what gets you excited?
I think that's a really key point. Strategy is embedded in everything that you should be doing, and it sounds like that's true at KPMG. It's just the focus of that strategy. I want to ask you, Palmer, you mentioned the ease of maybe transferring roles or practices inside of KPMG. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like for folks? Like, let's say I recruit into deal advisory and I'm like, you know what? This is interesting, but not necessarily where I want to be long term. It sounds like it's fairly straightforward for me to make an internal transition.
There has to be a business need. But yes, if you have the skills and the interest and there's a need in the practice that you want to go into, then it can be very easy. If you are in a practice and you will go into a group that's gone cold, then it might take longer. So I think it's being realistic into where do you want to transfer into, and is that practice running hot right now and could use your skills? But we have a whole career mobility practice that helps with those discussions. And we'll talk to you about, okay, I'm in deal advisory, for example, but I want to move into strategy. Well, that's within the same service group. That's relatively easier to look within house to kind of see like what's open. If you're someone going though into audit and wants to go into deal, believe it or not, that's easier too, because the accounting knowledge of an auditor to do equity due diligence work is needed. So even though they're in different groups, that also makes sense because the skills are there. So if you're in a group though where your skills don't align with the practice you want to get into, get them a different way. Start networking, maybe get put on an engagement. You're not officially moving over to the practice, but you start learning and doing the work of that practice. And then organically, you might change practices.
I love that. Make the career that you want, whether it's through official or perhaps some more unofficial means.
Correct.
I wanted to ask you, Palmer, you mentioned kind of some sectors and practices are hot and some are not.
Yeah.
Right. Business is cyclical, right? Consulting practice areas and the demand for those services is cyclical. You mentioned at the top of our call that, you know what, there's hiring going on everywhere, which I believe you, that's technically true. But where is that hiring overweight right now, and where is it perhaps underweight?
So I would say if you ask me every month, you might get a different answer. But what has remained true is healthcare and government. It has not slowed down, even when other groups have slowed down. There's always going to need to transform within the health and government space. And when you think of the health and government space, some people don't think of technology, but that is exactly what they need, are people who understand technology and business. So I don't think you have to be so siloed that I only want to do this industry, but maybe be open to something that you may not have thought that you wanted to do, but because you see positions there. So health and government is definitely a space that has remained busy, and I think will always continue to remain busy. Our federal space, because of, again, that's still health and government, but it's different. Federal contracts, we have a huge federal contract space. Financial services is starting to pick up as well. Our strategy group is talking to me about wanting to hire more, which that's always a good sign. Every time I hear deal advisory and strategy picking up, that means consulting is also going to pick up, because when deal gets colder, then consulting gets colder. It's kind of the wave. So good signs when strategy is wanting to talk about hiring a lot more people. So that, I would say those are the biggest groups I hear from. You know, there's annuity work with internal audit and our forensic. Well, forensics not as much annuity, that's more just in time, but we're always going to have some annuity work, which keeps things going. And if you like consistency, then going into an annuity type practice would suit you well. If you like the up and down, then that's okay too.
One of the key insights I think that you pulled out, that I pulled out from that answer, is just the interrelatedness of all of these sectors and practice areas, and looking at hiring practices in one sector, even if I'm not necessarily interested in that sector, to start to get a clue around where hiring may be picking up in the future. So I think that's a key insight that I wanted to call out for folks who are listening.
Hey, Strategy Simplified. It's Japheth here, your producer, and I really quickly wanted to pop in to tell you about Black Belt. So if you're targeting a consulting role at a firm like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, Oliver Wyman, Accenture, you name it, Black Belt is a structured case prep program that might be exactly what you need to push you over the hump and land that offer. So it is a structured case coaching program where you'll get one-on-one coaching from a former McKinsey, Bain, or BCG consultant. You'll also get a year of free access to our new community for exclusive employer info sessions, training, master classes, community support, and much more. Last but not least, you get unlimited digital materials to support your case prep progress. Oh, and by the way, over 80% of Black Belts who complete the program land a consulting role. That's pretty incredible. So we'd love to see you inside of Black Belt. Join at the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Palmer, I wanted to ask you, those sectors, those practice areas that are hiring right now, are they looking for early career talent? Are they looking for mid-career talent? All of the above? Who qualifies?
Yeah. So I specifically lead the early career talent. So when you think of, so I can speak the most to that. So a student that is looking for an internship or is about to graduate, all the way up to someone who has 1 to 2, maybe 3 years of work experience and looking for a career change. That's our early career scope. And that is the group that is looking to hire. We plan to post our positions in early September. Audit and tax will be in August. We're intentionally in September because we're getting through our intern conversions to determine which practices will need more and how much. From a full-time perspective, though, there are positions open for managers, directors, and above. That is the experienced hire space. I can't speak to which groups are hotter or colder, but I tend to think that if we're warm in one group in campus, there also is the same all the way up. So your healthcare, your federal, your strategy, those are the groups that we're seeing. Actually, I know we are hot in strategy because I've seen a few partner and MD recs come through as approved with hires, which if they're hiring partners and MDs, the rest is following.
That's one of the things I tell our community often is follow the partner and the practice leader hires because they're going to build teams underneath them. And you know that downstream hiring is coming after that. So
Yes.
Great insight there. For our early career talent on the call today and listening to this podcast, you said applications open in September. Can you give them a few maybe insider tips, tricks, strategies to stand out in the application process?
Sure. So one caveat I saw, I'm not keeping up with the chat very great, but one thing I saw is we are hiring some MBAs as senior associate into our strategy group. So that is the one exception to, I said, within our portfolio of early talent. That's not really early talent because they're coming in with several years, but it is someone off campus. So it still falls within the window. And there will be some MBA hiring in the strategy space. So look out for that to answer that question. Remind me your question again. Say it one more time.
Yeah. How can folks stand out in the application process as KPMG is evaluating them?
Network. I think that's the best way. Know who your recruiter is at your campus. If you don't have it, a recruiter, you took the time to join this. So ping me and I'll connect you with someone if you're interested in. You have to be an own advocate for your own career. So the more people that you connect with, now I'm not saying get on LinkedIn and reach out to 50 people because that's not what I'm saying. Like pick a few and really try to build that relationship with the fewer people. I would also look at skills and make sure your resume notes the skills that you're going to bring to the table because we are moving towards a skills-based hiring, which is still your major. I mean, your major also factors into what skills you bring, but if you have knowledge in certain systems or advanced analytics or anything like that, make sure that's really clear. Also, make it really clear when you're available to be hired. So when are you graduating? If it's hard for us to follow that just save time for the recruiter, if you don't mind, and list exactly when you're available. If you're going to be involved on campus, do a leader role, not just be involved in the club. That stands out. It shows you it was more of an investment of your time and not just a nice to have on the resume. If you work full-time, make that very clear because then it explains why you may not have as many leadership opportunities because you're working full-time. That also adds value to us as we're looking because people that have to balance the work and school shows that you're good with time management.
So there's a few different ways, Palmer, that folks can stand out just based on what you just referenced. Yeah. Is there one common thread that you see that kind of weaves its way through all of those experiences and can be summed up in a single word or two, right? That you would just say, you know what, my top candidates have this skill, they have this attribute.
Critical thinking. You need to be able to answer good questions. Like if you get the interview, first you got to land the interview. But if you get the interview, there's going to be a lot of critical thinking questions and how you think through things, how you process these questions. So do a lot of mock interviews, have good examples. I would say critical thinking. We're seeing hires coming out want to be told what to do, which is good in some ways, but it's also someone who can maybe be told what to do initially, but then the next time learn from it and be able to come with, I think this is how this should be done. Am I on the right path? that shows that you're thinking and learning and not just waiting to be told what to do, that will stand out.
I love that. Come with a perspective on how you want to solve the problem and then be open to being redirected if you need to.
Yes.
So if critical thinking is the core skill that KPMG is looking for, the best way I know how to assess critical thinking is through the case interview. Are you using case interviews inside of your evaluation process? And if so, how should folks prepare?
So some groups are. If you're interviewing for an MBA level senior associate, you're going to have a case component. We actually use situational questions to drive our critical thinking questions. There's a mix of behavioral, but also, so instead of it being a full case pen to paper, you're asking case type questions in a situational manner to still stay within that 30 to 45-minute window. So that is how we're doing it. And a lot of it is if you ask the right questions, then you can still assess the critical thinking component.
Can you give us an example of what a situational question could look like?
I know I'm blanking. What I will do instead, which will help everybody else, is I will give some sample critical situational questions that can be shared with this group afterwards, so they don't have just one question to pick from. So that will help direct them for it, if that's okay. I'll send
Amazing. That's very, very generous of you, Palmer. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
One of the trends that I've seen taking place in just evaluation of candidates across consulting is the rise of these online assessments. So I'm seeing them take place at Deloitte, at McKinsey, at employers like Capital One. Does KPMG ask candidates to go through an online assessment similar to those before you would actually be called in for an interview with a human being?
So we did, and we found that that was not helpful to our interview process, and we are no longer doing that. So I do not think that that will come back.
Okay, wonderful. And so to just dig into that for a minute, you found that there was no correlation between folks who did well on the online assessment and folks who ended up being top performers on the job?
Correct. We also found the assessment to not make a clear distinction between who should be selected and who shouldn't in a fair manner. And so we didn't want that to drive the wrong decisions for who should be selected for an interview. And so based on the data presented, we came to that this was not helping our recruiting process, but in fact, hindering the best decisions. So that's why we, what would you say? You fail fast and you move on.
100%. Kudos to you for identifying that early and then pivoting. Yeah. So if there's no online assessment, can you just walk our candidates through what the process and the timeline looks like for the recruiting process, right? Like, let's say I apply on day one. What happens after that, and how long until I can expect to hear from you? And can you just walk us through those steps?
Sure. So it depends on which one you're applying for. So I'm going to use our traditional associate as the first example, and then I can give an example of our MBA senior associate. So jobs go live for internship on September 5th as an example. You apply, the recruiter, depending on which job you apply for, and the volume of applicants is when it will close. So if it's a job that we get significant amount of applicants, then it might close in 3 or 4 days. It might close in 2 weeks if we're still waiting on applicants. So we gauge the volume of applicants because we want to have a sufficient pool. And then we go through selections and they get invited if you're selected for an interview. So that could range between a week to 3 weeks, depending on the applicant volume. Also, it depends on if the recruiter is making the selections or if the practice is. And it varies depending on the practice, if they want to do it, or if they will delegate it to the recruiter. And that isn't consistent. It really just depends on the practice. And so if there's a window where we have to send it to the practice, that also can add a few days to the process. So if you're going through and you're like, this person found out yesterday, but I'm still waiting, that doesn't mean you're still not being considered. It just, if you're in different jobs, it could be a few week to 2 week delay, but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the application. It's just in the process still. Once you get selected for an interview, we try to move quickly and have 2 back-to-back interviews, 30 to 45 minutes, depending on which practice it is. And then after that, we debrief and offers go out. If you receive an offer and then you are invited to KPMG Lake House. It's our sell event. Everyone who gets an offer goes to KPMG Lake House, and it's a one night. You get to network with everyone there, and it truly is a way to just help you decide if you want to accept your offer. Some might have already accepted, and they still get to come to network with their future interns or associates that they'll be working with. And then the advanced degree, I can walk through that quickly. The advanced degree is a little bit more. Sometimes they do 3 interviews. It is a case study, and it all depends on sufficient pull. So the timing follows the traditional MBA. There's also rules that we have to follow. So we follow the rules based on the campuses that we're posting at. But we are an open application as well. So even if we are actively at your campus, that you can still apply. Like you can go to KPMG Careers, and if the job's open, we post them and we close them when they're full, and it's rolling. So it's rolling interviews, it's rolling postings. So even if we don't come to your campus, don't be discouraged. You can certainly still apply.
Palmer, that's a really, really helpful walkthrough. A couple of follow-ups, if you don't mind. First, I heard you say that some openings might be open for a handful of days, others might be open for a couple of weeks. Are you encouraging folks then to apply as soon as that application opens to maximize their chances of success?
Yes. And I also encourage you to pick one. And the reason why is you're only going to get to interview for one. So if you do 2, then what the recruiters will do is we'll get picked for one, and it may not be the one you wanted. So if you really want one, apply to the one you want to the day it goes open. If you don't get selected, then you can go in and apply for another one. And also don't get discouraged if you get declined from one, because you might get selected for the next one because your skills might align better for the other job. So I think that's true for any of the firms, not just KPMG, that it's okay to, I know it might be frustrating on your side, but it's okay to apply if you get to something else. That doesn't mean you're not considered great for KPMG. This might be that one specific job you weren't the best candidate.
And would you say that networking is the best way to identify which job that a candidate would be the best fit for?
I think so. And really looking internally, reading, the website has a lot to offer, but I do think networking is the best way to learn more.
Wonderful. Palmer, before we move on to the next part of our conversation, I wanted to ask you, do you just have some words of wisdom that you wanted to share with the candidate community, whether it's reemphasizing something we've already talked about, whether it's something we haven't gotten a chance to touch on, just some parting words of wisdom that folks can take with them as they pursue a role at KPMG or just in consulting in general?
Yeah, I think my best advice is to be flexible and open to an engagement that you may not thought you wanted to work on. And the reason I say that is we're moving towards less and less granular for our entry-level staff. We're trying to bring it up and making sure that you get a vast opportunity to see things before you decide, I know I want to be a forensic accountant. Well, you might actually like this group more. And so not everyone's going to get the exact same experience on every single project. We look at skills, but we are trying our best to make it less granular and more broad as we're bringing people in. And that may or may not appeal to you. But that being said, if you know, you're like, I want to do cybersecurity, period. That's what I want to do. Voice it, because then we can try to put you on that engagement. But just know that you might be doing something with low code initially, again, depending on where the work is and what's going on. So I would say be flexible, be open, and expect to own your own career. There are plenty of tools. You'll get a performance manager, you'll get a transition coach. Like, people want to help you grow, but you are your best advocate, and you have to advocate for yourself and own your own career throughout your career, and not expect someone to do it for you, because people will support you, but they will not do it for you.
100%. Is that the best piece of career advice that you've ever received? Or was there another piece of advice that shaped your career and how you've evolved to the role you're at now?
So maybe hard to believe, I was too much probably of a people pleaser when I joined the firm. And I learned really quick that it's okay to not everybody to always agree, but to be respectful of everyone's opinions, and that they want to hear your opinion. That actually drives better decisions. And so as I developed as a performance manager, I also learned that I'm not doing a disservice if I just give good feedback to my counsel lead. they need to hear the constructive feedback. It only makes them better. So I would say my best advice is to roll up your sleeves and have thick skin, because the people who give you constructive feedback are actually the best for your career, not the ones that praise you every day. It's good, you need that, but you're going to grow more from the people who take the time to give you the constructive growth feedback.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. If you're a management consultant client, I think you've experienced that firsthand from our team. So, Palmer, if we could get a little bit more tactical for just a minute,
Sure.
how does someone who's maybe applying for an internship or early career role put that into practice their first 90 days on the job, right? I know I'm supposed to own my own career. I know I'm supposed to have thick skin. What does that look like in practicality?
So internship's so short that it's really hard to showcase that in, a summer. But I think you can showcase by listening. We all want to talk, but showcase it by listening and then coming back with like what you heard and what you learned. And then being flexible. I know it sounds like you're not advocating for your, but you are, in a way of showing that you can adapt even through an internship. So that would be what I would say. If you're starting as an associate, just be a sponge. Like really just be open, be eager, network. If you're in the office and you see someone's not on a call, like pop in and say hello and introduce yourself. They want to meet you. So be bold in that aspect as you start your career.
One of the best pieces of early career advice I ever received is say yes to everything. And you'll be seen as indispensable really, really quickly, and you'll figure out really, really quickly what you want to do long term. So I think that really dovetails with what I heard and put into practice early on, and it really worked well for me and expanded my professional network in a way that I wouldn't have been able to expand otherwise.
I agree completely, especially as you're beginning your career. Be a yes person. As you develop, you can figure out where you pick and choose and it's not even no. Learn how to say no in a way that you're not turning someone down, but you're maybe coming up with a solution. I do that a lot with my clients. They might say, "Can we do X, Y, and Z?" And it's not happening. But I can talk to them about, well, let's talk about it. Like, I love that. Let's talk about it. Because then you end up coming to a yes. It may not be what they asked for, but it ends up hopefully being a solution that still works for them. And it works within the realms of recruiting or HR or whatever the solution we're trying to solve.
That ability to redirect a conversation and say no without saying no, I think is one of the hallmarks of executive presence and client services. And I'll just say this for all the students on the call and listening to the podcast today. If you can build that skill now, you'll stand out as a top performer really, really early on.
Yeah.
Palmer, before we open up this conversation to a couple of audience questions, I wanted to just get to know you a little bit better and have our community get to know you a little bit better as well. So outside of work, outside of KPMG, what do you like to do? Like, what are you reading these days, watching these days? Do you have some recommendations you can bring to our community?
Oh, so much. So I'm reading The Women. It is set a Vietnam War about nurses that went and served and coming back and not having the respect. And I honestly didn't know enough about it, so I'm learning that. It's an interesting read. Kristen Hanna's the author, so recommend that. I'm in a book club, so we always have to keep up. It's my first time doing an Audible. I like a written book, but I couldn't keep up. So I was like, okay, I got to do the Audible so I can do it in between times. And then as far as shows, I love Netflix. So I watch a lot of Netflix shows. If you name it, I've probably seen it. But they just released a new series for All American. It's a football show. So I just watched season 6. Really love that. I love Outlander. So yeah, I like a lot of good shows. As far as what I do on my personal, I love to travel. So Italy is my absolute favorite place in the world to go. Lake Como specifically. So add it to your bucket list. And then my next would be sailing. My husband and I like to charter a catamaran with 2 other couples, and we sail through the British Virgin Islands with the captain. That's what we save up for, but we love that vacation. So island hopping is a lot of fun. And I've got a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old little girl, so they keep me very, very busy in a good way. And then I know I said tennis early. I play tennis, so I do that as well to kind of get some exercise.
Absolutely. Well, maybe next time I'm in Atlanta, we'll have to get together for a fun little tennis match because that's
Yeah.
one way that I like to spend my time as well. I have to ask you really quickly, your craziest sailing story. Have you ever gotten caught in a storm or thought you were going to capsize or anything like that?
No, the good thing about the BVI is you're tucked away in islands, so it's not rough. It's actually the way to go. But the craziest story is one of our friends on the boat, Michael, he dropped his phone in the water and it was dark at night. So we're like, it's gone. The next morning he went down and he was able, like it was to where he could dive down. It was still worked. The next day, the phone still worked. So kudos to Apple.
That's a miracle if I've ever heard of one. So,
Mhm.
well, well, Palmer, thanks so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed getting to know KPMG.
That wraps up another episode of Strategy Simplified. We'd love to connect with you. Check us out on LinkedIn, on TikTok, on Instagram, and other social channels. Check us out on a future upcoming event. Check us out on our email, team@managementconsultant.com, if you got questions about how to break into consulting or about a firm like KPMG, etc. We want to connect with you. And make sure to connect with KPMG. Links in this episode's show notes for a bunch of resources and to connect with KPMG and Management Consultant. My name is Japheth Mast, your host. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you on another episode of Strategy Simplified soon.